How many of you took transit to get here today? I know, right? I didn't, and I'm a planner and I'm a huge transit fan, and I am a bad transit taker in Texas, but I hope we can change that. I think these folks are really going to help us change it. So we're talking about adding access and mobility to Texas transit. The rise of technology-enabled micro-mobility, micro-transit, and on-demand rideshare has dramatically expanded options available. It really does have, as you can see in the program, the transformative potential to unlock opportunity and freedom to move. This is very consistent with all the things we've been talking about today. With some of the apps and technology, which we were just talking about as well, there really can be a revolution in mobility. I feel like we're living in an age of constant disruption. The new normal is there is going to be no new normal, but this is really a positive revolution that these agencies are undertaking, and then working together to sort of lay the groundwork that so we can get to where we want to be with our families and work, and just to have a quality of life in our communities. So just a little bit more about Stantec. This is, I've recently joined Stantec, and they work on transit, all aspects: light rail, intercity rail, subway, streetcar, conventional bus, and bus rapid transit. Just a few large-scale projects they're working on in North America. In Eastern Contra Costa County, for the Transit Authority, we're leading the design of hydrogen fueling stations for buses powered with hydrogen fuel cells, and that includes a fleet of about 30 electric buses and 40 paratransit vehicles. Stantec was also selected to lead the construction management for a $220 million Blue Line project in the city of Indianapolis. It'll be the third BRT line connecting people to the airport. And then just in last December, Stantec was selected to design the California High-Speed Rail Authority's extension from Merced to Madera, which covers almost 40 miles of rail and will include 40 structures. Stantec has been proud to work with California High-Speed Rail for 8 years. I'm still very optimistic about rail expansion in Texas as well. So for myself, I'm a planner. I love transportation. I love transit. And I attended UT CRP program here on campus. We have a couple other Longhorns here. I have 25 years of National Environmental Policy Act compliance experience for infrastructure. A lot of my colleagues are here in the room, either consulting firms or really innovative projects we've worked on with TxDOT. Many of our colleagues actually have had the opportunity to work with each of these agencies that are on the stage. So formerly, I was with Cox McLain Environmental Consulting for 15 years, and we were a WBE, DBE company that specifically benefited from the procurement practices that agencies like those on the stage made available. So we were able to grow our capabilities on the environmental side of clearance to get projects on the ground. So I really appreciate that particular process, and also how much determination it takes to actually get projects on the ground. One other thing I just wanted to say about environmental resources, all of what we're talking about with infrastructure, everything I've done in my career as a National Environmental Policy Act specialist is trying to protect resources while we develop projects. I just want to make the very clear point that if we don't protect vulnerable environmental resources, whether they're natural resources, cultural resources, or from the human environment, they won't be there for future generations. So we've got to strike that balance between protecting vulnerable resources and modernizing our infrastructure. So with that, I'm really excited about this fantastic panel up here. We have Hans Michael Ruthe, Senior Manager of Service Planning at Dallas Area Rapid Transit, Julie Lampkin, who's the Director of Demand Response for Capital Metro here in Austin, Kammy Horne, who's Senior Vice President of Planning and Development with Via Metropolitan Transit in San Antonio, and Susan Daniels, Deputy Director of the Corridor Program Office in the City of Austin. I'll let each of our panelists introduce themselves a bit, and then we'll talk a little bit more about adding access and mobility to Texas Transit. So Hans Michael.
Thank you. Thank you. Very happy to be here. Happy to be on this awesome panel. I work in service planning and scheduling. We're under Dee Leggett, who was here on one of the previous panels, and work a lot with Daryl Spencer, who just got off the stage. And we are in charge of the 100 bus routes that DART operates, and about 30, 31, really just 30 on-demand zones, geographic zones in our service area. Our service area is dwarfed by Houston Metro. We're only 760 square miles, but they're almost double that. So that was really impressive to learn. But I'm very happy to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Hello, I'm Julie Lampkin. I work at Capital Metro here in Austin. I am the Director of Demand Response Operations, which covers our Metro Access Paratransit service. So that services for people with disabilities who can't ride the fixed route bus. And I also oversee our microtransit services that we call Pickup. And I'm very honored to be here with you guys today.
Susan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Daniels with the City of Austin's Corridor Program Office. I've been working in the last couple of decades on planning and implementing projects that affect our built environment, really answering the question of how can we build a better city. The Corridor Program Office currently focuses on implementation of mobility improvements across 50 miles of roadway here in Austin, our major corridors that create the backbone of our transportation network. Roadways like Burnett Road, North Lamar, South Lamar, Airport Boulevard, William Cannon, Slaughter Lane, and Riverside. These are the corridors that really get people to where they need to go, and we need to be able to make the appropriate infrastructure improvements to meet all of our mobility goals, not only reducing congestion and traffic delays, safety components, connectivity and transit supportive, but we also need to do it in a way that we can support our larger community and the specific communities through which our roadways and our major corridors transverse. So how can we do that in a way that supports that community and brings about better outcomes for them, not just in the mobility realm, but how that mobility in the land use and the specific ways that people need to be lifted up and get better outcomes all across the board.
Thank you. Kammy.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kammy Horne. I'm the Senior Vice President of Planning and Development at Via Metropolitan Transit in San Antonio. And my area covers everything from engineering, real estate, construction, future planning, as well as all of our service planning and scheduling and our bus stops. And I think today some of the focus is going to be on our micro transit, what we call Via Link. So I think we're going to talk about that in a bit. Hans Michael mentioned the service area of DART, and it reminded me to tell you all something that a lot of people don't know about San Antonio, which is our service area is over 1,200 square miles. And we are one of the largest transit agencies in the country with the least amount of transit funding. And definitely that is the case in the state of Texas. So we are almost double the size of Austin's and Dallas's service area. About Houston, we get only a little more now than a half a cent of sales tax to fund that service. So, I mean, that's really incredible. And then especially when you think about that sales tax, it's San Antonio. So we are an incredibly underfunded system, but we're doing a lot. We are doing a lot with what we have. And I'm going to be excited to share that with you today. But before I stop introducing myself, I have to give another shout out to our moderator. I was so thrilled to hear that Ashley McLain was moderating our session. And I want to tell you all, before coming to VIA 4 years ago, I was in the private sector. And Ashley is one of the most passionate and entrepreneurial people in this industry that I have ever met. And so she quickly mentioned her company name, which of course is also her last name. I have so much respect for you, and I'm so excited about our panel today, Ashley. And thank you all for being here.
Wow, your check's under the chair. Thank you. It's been really exciting. And there are so many of our colleagues here in the room. And the theme of collaboration is so important to me. I've joined a really big company, but like we're all on the same team. We're all trying to improve quality of life and design with community in mind and take care of each other. I really appreciate earlier panelists talking about wellness, health, and well-being. I mean, we all have learned a lot with the pandemic about being truthful about the lives we're all leading and supporting each other. So shout out to Kammy. She's amazing too. Okay, Hans Michael, tell us a little bit more about increased job access for industrial and warehouse work. I think that's really important, something we don't talk about a lot.
Sure. This is something that we were able to observe achievement in just recently. In January 2022, we launched a brand new bus network. There's a massive generational change that occurred there. We had never done anything like that in the 40-year history of DART. And one of the aspects of that change was a big expansion of our on-demand service, especially to areas like this. And these are, they proliferate throughout the Metroplex, especially east of the airport, DFW. And they're sparse activity, lots of land area, and tens of thousands of jobs in these areas. And most of the jobs are the $15 to $20 an hour range. So it's kind of transit's, at least in the DFW area, transit's sweet spot in terms of ridership, at least what we had observed in the past. And we struggled to get people to work in these places. The ridership was very inconsistent. The market that was served, sometimes these facilities would shut down. There was a supply chain issue with some of the sheet metal manufacturers in these areas, and so tens of thousands of people lost their jobs just in a matter of one pay period, and it decimated fixed route ridership. But since we have extended GoLink service, which is what we call our on-demand service, our overall ridership in these zones cumulatively and one by one has increased dramatically, like 300, 500%. And we think it's because customers don't have to wait as long as they did before, because we have about a 12 to 15 minute wait time. And in the past, because ridership was so low and per trip utilization resources are so low, we could only serve these places every 40, 35 minutes. And also because these warehouses, in some cases, are 3/4 of a mile long. And so the bus drops you off at the corner, which is great placement for us, but you still got to walk, 10 minutes to get to where you clock in. So with the new on-demand zone, we're able to go into the parking lots. We're able to go right to the employee entrance, which often is for some reason, on the backside, away from the highway and other access points. So we're very happy with the way demand response has been able to help people working at these types of facilities.
That's such an interesting problem to be able to define and then solve. So it's really exciting that you have new capabilities to do that. I'd like you to go ahead and talk a little bit about your app-based innovations and your collaboration with Uber. Yeah.
So one thing that's also really helped our demand response ridership growth has been this integration that we achieved with Uber. And I'm kind of out of my depth here with talking about APIs and top level integration and all that stuff. There's a whole team at DART dedicated to this, and they've done a great thing. It used to be in the past, our GoLink service was always supplemented by Uber because we just have one or two dedicated vehicles out there. But you would have to click on a transfer, a deep link that would take you to your Uber account. So if you didn't have an Uber account, if you didn't have the Uber app, then there was a hard stop to your pickup. But now we've got it integrated to the point where it's all done through the GoPass app. So the DART app will give you the option to opt in to Uber. And if you choose to opt in, you do it once for all. I think the terms of agreement repeat every 6 months or something. But anyway, basically you're taken care of if you opt in at one time. And then it'll show you that the GoLink vehicle will take, in some cases it might be busy, so maybe it'll take 20, 30 minutes to get there. But then it'll say these other GoLink options will get you there in 2 to 4 minutes. So if you click on those, then Uber picks up the ride. And it's been awesome. The one thing that's a drag is the opt-in rate. It's much lower than we thought. But right now, since we implemented this in January 23rd of just last month, Uber is picking up 40% of our GoLink trips. So we're very excited about that.
Change is happening very quickly. Okay, let's talk a little bit, Julie, about what's happening at Capital Metro and the framework that you use to evaluate and refine micro transit zones.
Yeah, so for our micro transit zones, we call ours pickup. And so what we're looking at is areas that have a high need for transit, but no access to transit. We call those transit deserts. And so whether we had a low performing fixed route rate in that area that discontinued and the community says, no, I still need that service. So we put, a microtransit pickup service within that area. Or we've looked at, census from the city to see what areas don't have transit but need it. And we are looking at 3 core demographic values when determining our zones for pickup. One of the core demographic values would be the community characteristics. And within the community characteristics, we're looking at percentage of households in poverty. So if there is 10% or greater in that area in poverty, it's been proven to be a good place to put a microtransit service. And we're also looking at the minority population within the area because we don't want to exclude anyone. So we're looking at the minority population. We're looking at population age 65 and over that may not have transportation and need access to transportation. We're also looking at 0-car households. So we've seen that if an area has greater than 5% with 0-car households, it's a great place to put microtransit service to provide transportation. And then we're also looking at what are the essential places to go within the zone. Things like shopping centers, grocery stores, and medical centers. So if we are finding those areas and there's no transportation, that's a great place to put microtransit. And then we're also looking at the median income, yearly income. If you're making $100,000, that might not be the right place to put the pickup zone, but we have found that anywhere between $85,000 and lower is a good place to put that has a need for the transit service. And then the second demographic value would be sustainability. What's the sustainability? So we're looking at, is it cost effective? So the more people we can get, the more ridership we can get, the less cost it is to us, right? So it's $15 to our agency per trip and $1.75 for the customer. So if we can get an average of 4 passengers per hour riding this service, then it becomes cost effective for us. And then, so our goal is to have 30% shared ride services. And then we also have our Metro Access paratransit customers that we're looking at. Of those customers, are they in these zones? And will that give them mobility freedom to use our services? Because with paratransit service, you have to plan your life a day in advance. You have to know what you're going to do tomorrow. You have to call and book 1 to 3 days in advance. You can't just decide, oh, I forgot butter and I need to run to the store. So that gives them that freedom to be able to pick up the phone and get an on-demand ride, go to the store and get their ingredients so they can make their dinner. And then also the service quality. We're measuring our service quality. So our on-time performance, we set a goal to where we will maintain 15-minute pickup response time after the customer has accepted the trip. And then square miles is very important, but it depends on whether it's a suburban area or an urban area. So for the suburban areas, what we found is a 6 square mile radius seems to work well. And then for the urban areas where everything is, you've got a lot of places and it's all close together, 3 square miles tends to work well in the urban areas. And we score each category. They can get up to 30 points, max 90. So the higher they score, the better the zone works.
I'm really struck by the common charge of transit agencies is to serve people, especially those who don't are non-drivers for a variety of reasons, and the equity focus. Like my background from a NEPA perspective is compliance with the executive order on environmental justice. And one thing I want to talk about at some point this morning is Justice 40. How are we using that as a charge to continue to do better, providing equitable access? But just a quick note, I don't know if y'all know, but in 2023, is that the year? The median household income for a family of 4, the poverty line is $30,000. So if you make $30,000 and 1 cent, you're not living below poverty technically. So that's pretty hard to swallow. So something to keep in mind, and the importance of keeping fares low or access to services very affordable for those communities. Thank you. Susan, tell us a little bit more about the corridor program. If you have buses, they've got to drive on roadways, and the focus for the corridor program in the city of Austin really placemaking and making the streets holistic for communities. Talk a little bit more about the program, please.
Thank you, Ashley. One of the things that really that I'm seeing across the board, not just on this panel, but that we share with everybody in the audience, is the desire to have better outcomes for our community, right? We can talk about the mobility side of that, traffic delay, congestion, safety, all of those different components, or the number of improvements we're doing, the lane miles or the 100 bicycle connections that we're making. But what I'm thrilled about is that our conversations are now also focusing on the community side and how we can best support folks. The Corridor Program Office started in 2016 after the city passed the mobility bond, really looking to implement and prioritize our investments. And we went through this prioritization process. This was our city council for the first time, put in writing in a contract with voters that we wanted to not only meet, the congestion and the safety components, but we wanted to lift our community to create livable, safe, walkable, transit supportive infrastructure. And so we went through a long process of really trying to connect the dots of land use and transportation. And for the first time, we got policy directive to say, prioritize your investments based on this. And so what we did was all of the major mobility side of the shop, the things that we can measure more easily, we created a score for those. We looked at how do we invest when we have a third of the funds that are necessary for all of the improvements that have been identified as needs. How do we invest? So if we look at one investment package versus another, how can we score those from a mobility priority perspective, but then also a community perspective? And so for the first time, we dug even deeper than we've ever done before on what does it mean to get people to where they need to go, right? So it meant we needed to look at all of those destinations along our corridor where people are living and starting to say, okay, we know where the affordable housing is. We know the folks who rely most heavily on transit, and we need to ensure that we have not only the infrastructure along our corridor, but the off corridor infrastructure that ties that affordable housing to the corridor, to the transit stop, and then to different destinations. And looking at prioritizing via the high priority destinations, things like, can we get folks to city services and social services Can we get folks to WIC centers and healthy food retail? And where are these locations? And as long and a whole slew of other components. We worked with every single department in the city, including sustainability and housing. Our medical director, looking at what are those key indicators of success that we can tie mobility and land use to these greater community outcomes. So we created an ability to have a mobility score and a community index of how well we're meeting those outcomes. By doing that, we were able to prioritize our investments correctly. And then we're diving down to another level. And this is where the placemaking and the community representation comes in. We don't want one corridor to look and feel just like the other corridor. It's incredibly important that we are respecting and highlighting the historical narratives, the cultural narratives, the people of the area, the businesses, neighbors in these roadways that we're passing through. So how can we create a better place for them? We are looking at creating kind of little pocket green areas anywhere that we can, making sure that we're addressing shade equity. We've been able to work with our development services department who takes tree mitigation funds. We are able to use those, and we're going to be planting 2,000 additional trees because of that effort, and putting that shade in the right places, right? If we're going to focus more on multimodal infrastructure for bicyclists, pedestrians, transit users, we need to have the shade along the pathways that they are traversing. So there's a lot of different elements that we're trying to tie together, but transit stops have a big role in that. In our 9 corridors in the corridor program, we have coordinated 250 transit stops with Capital Metro to help implement their 5-year service plan, to help set them up for the longer plans that they have as well. So we're really excited about what we're able to achieve. Right now, we're starting to get some of that infrastructure on the ground. You can go out and look at the construction that's happening right now at Burnett Road and Koenig Lane. That's one of our very first areas that we're getting a placemaking project in. But for our projects, we're kind of bringing up the tail of the 2016 bond. The larger projects, of course, take longer to get on the ground. The placemaking components, the community reflective elements go in at the end. And so while we have 34 locations that are in design and waiting for implementation, and many more after that, hold tight, you'll be able to see the effect of this program. We've been able to turn something that typically in mobility projects has very little funding to, with some of our leveraging that we've been able to do, to get to about, I think we're at $13 million for this type of infrastructure now. And it's going to make a huge difference in our community when we are finished with these projects.
And I can speak to the Riverside Drive project because our folks worked on that. And any of you who drive Riverside, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be very pedestrian friendly, bicycle friendly. It'll accommodate the blue line that Capital Metro is working on. It connects up with I-35 and TxDOT's working along with Cap Metro and the city of Austin to connect I-35 and the blue line and make Riverside bike and pedestrian friendly to go all the way to the airport. So this is my neighborhood. I have a dream. I want to get on the train and go to the airport. So keep your fingers crossed with me. That's great for collaboration, Susan. Okay, Kammy, talk to us more about VIA in San Antonio and this amazing VIA Link app.
Sure. Thank you, Ashley. And I want to take a step back here in just a minute and talk about what microtransit is, just given the diversity of this audience. But I also want to let you all know, you asked a question, Ashley, about like who took transit here today. I'm going to tell you that working in this space now for 4 years exclusively, I came from the private sector, but I gave up my car 2 years ago to force myself to use transit as much as possible and to use our services and to really think about what that means. In San Antonio, there has been challenges. Of course, I have options to use the TNCs when I need to, but I am very observant about what we're doing and how we're doing it, including this microtransit space. Because there's certain things that when you're just on the planning or the development side that you don't really internalize until you use the services. So I want to put that out there to people that are working in this space to maybe force yourself to try it if you're not, and especially and if you're in an area that might not be as easy to use transit. So just stepping back a little bit, we're going to talk about Via Link, which is our microtransit. What is that? Well, what it is and what it is in San Antonio, it's basically like an Uber or Lyft pool service with 8 passenger vans that you're in a zone. And in San Antonio, we were the first to do this, actually. We have zones. Our first zone was 17 square miles, usually in areas where the fixed route service doesn't work as well. So you can go anywhere to anywhere in the zone. So just imagine using like Uber or Lyft, but you might be sharing the ride. You can track your service. It's the same cost as your bus route, as your bus ride. So for us, $1.30 plus any discounts. So you can get anywhere to anywhere within the zone, and you can connect into the actual bus service, which I'm thinking around, you can't ever know for sure, but maybe 15 to 20% actually are connecting into our fixed route service. If you want to take a look at our maps, it's really hard to talk about this particular topic without maps or PowerPoint, as I'm sure our panelists are maybe feeling that you can go to keepsamoving.com or just Google Via Link. We have a lot of maps that are out there on our website. We have 3 zones. A northeast zone was our first zone. It was 17 square miles. Again, anywhere to anywhere, including connecting into our service. Then we opened northwest zone that also includes some major universities. And then we opened our south zone. That's our most recent zone that we opened last October. Some partnerships with Toyota, and Hans Michael talked a little bit too about some of the opportunities that you have to get people actually to the door. And the other thing that we have found, and we have a big Toyota center down in our south area, there's a lot of shift work that it's a challenge sometimes to serve shift work with regular regular line bus service. So these types of micromobilities can help overcome that as well. Couple things I'll put out there though that I've seen as some challenges is if you think about land use and building out, and one thing that came to mind, if you saw that story in the paper about that town in it was near Scottsdale, Arizona, and they built out town, and then suddenly they were not getting access to water, and it was like, oh my gosh, like why don't we have access to water? We have to have access to water. And it's interesting because that's what happens with transit. People will, call me and they'll be, way out in a far area, and why don't I have service? And so sometimes when we're using these other tools, I do get a little concerned that we don't kind of encourage sprawl and that type of thing. So that can be a little bit of a consideration. But right now, I do think that this microtransit is a great tool in our toolbox, as some have mentioned, to help with that on demand in areas where, the fixed route doesn't work as well. And, happy to talk more about this, but again, it's on our website, and, and it's really been doing phenomenally as far as supporting additional service in San Antonio.
Thank you, Kammy. Julie, will you talk a little bit about what you're doing with Spare Labs, and then I'm going to come back to Hans Michael.
Yes, so Spare Labs is a cloud-based software that we're looking at for our paratransit services. We currently use a system called Trapeze. I'm not going to say anything about Trapeze, but yeah, different panel for that one. But we're hoping with this new software, it's going to be more modern. It'll hopefully make our system more efficient, is what we're expecting, and it's also going to bring an accessibility aspect to it. So when I say that, it means that we will be able to hire the same people that we support because the software is accessible. So they'll be able to book reservations, come work with us and book reservations or something like that. So we're really excited about that. And then it'll be accessible for our customers. So they won't have to call in to book a reservation. It'll be an accessible app where they can book their reservations online. So we're really excited about that. And they'll also be able to see, just like an Uber, in the pickup service, the microtransit service, they'll be able to see their vehicle as it's approaching. Some of our customers have curb-to-curb service, which means you've got to be waiting out on the curb and we'll come and get you. Well, with this app, they can stay inside, be in the air, and say, oh, my vehicle's coming. Now let me go outside, instead of sitting out in the heat waiting for their transportation to come. So we're really excited about that. It's still in the development phase. We're hoping to launch late summer. We're not rushing. We want to make sure it works for paratransit, and if so, we've got a new software that we're excited to release.
That's excellent. And your holistic thinking in terms of utilizing apps and training employees who will be able to utilize your services. I really appreciate that holistic thinking. With regard to heat, I just have to mention real quick, I heard a presentation by Jeff Goodell from Rolling Stone not too long ago at 10 Across in Houston, and he's writing a book called The Heat Will Kill You First. Houston, he also wrote a book about water. We're talking about climate challenges and sustainability and investing in infrastructure that can last. So thinking ahead about especially vulnerable populations and the heat issue is huge. And keep gazing forward and keep an eye out for those additional conversations and coverage in journal outlets. So Hans and Michael, talk a little bit more about outreach struggles. I've been involved in public involvement in the past, and we really try to get to informed consent and educate people to understand the choices we're making and really hear them, because the public are the experts. They're the ones that can help you identify how to provide services. So tell me in particular about the Herculean efforts by your staff.
Yeah, so I think Kammy made a great point about somebody calling her and saying, hey, where's our service, right? I just moved here 45 miles away from San Antonio, and I want San Antonio to serve me. But so in that sense, we're kind of understanding in waves the decimation of the pandemic to our traditional public outreach methods. Obviously, at first, there was nobody on the bus. So there you realize, oh, something's changed. But then as time goes by, you realize that the stakeholders you used to depend on, some of those passed away, some of those moved away, some of those had to change. And so you've got to cultivate new contacts with a community that's still indoors mostly. And so it's very difficult. There was a lot of hand-wringing on our side as we were planning to implement this new bus network, and the fear that our customers just they didn't know. We'd lost the traditional handshake agreement that we'd had with them due to the force of the pandemic. And so it was nuts there for a little while. We were desperately knocking on doors of neighborhoods where we used to get good ridership. We were waiting out at transit centers to shake hands, or, not shake hands, I guess wave at customers who were stepping off routes that were going to be discontinued, and they didn't know. We did accomplish an amazing task. We interacted with 10% of the average weekdays boardings of all the routes that were being impacted, which may not sound like much, but that's thousands of people that we were able to find in the nooks and crannies of the greater Dallas area during the height of the pandemic. So it's an amazing accomplishment for our staff. They deserve a ton of credit for that. But also, we really enjoyed the response to the surveys that we were able to accomplish through our app. So we did some push notifications there. We got 7% response to original app users, so we're really excited about that.
So speaking of the apps and the app tools, like what kind of metrics are you getting? Is there anything surprising that you're seeing about either people who are using apps? You know, how are young people participating, elderly people? Just tell me a little bit more about what the apps are telling you. I know it's pretty new, so.
Well, I'll say something about the apps and just that we in San Antonio, I know I've been saying a lot about like the stats, but it's also the most economically segregated city in the United States. So yes, we have an app. Yes, we get information on the app, but we also have to make sure every time we put these services out there that you can still pay with cash, that you can still use the phone, that you can still use the phone to call in and rate your driver. Not on the app. You can do it on the app, but you can. But the app has provided great information. We're getting almost 5 stars across the board on the service, it gives you good information on trip patterns and things like that. But I just wanted to point that out, that as much as we move forward with technology, for us at least in San Antonio, we also have to really think about making sure that everything is equitable and accessible if you don't have the use of a smartphone.
That's a really, really good point. So I have kind of a higher level question. What is your favorite city with regard to transportation and transit? And you can't say your own city. Is there a model city out there that you think is getting this right? Doesn't have to be in the U.S.
Well, I go to New York City a lot, and took your city probably, but I think they are doing a lot of things right, but they have a lot of money to do it too. So I'll come back and I'll be like, hey, why can't we do this? I think as far as fare payment, they've done an incredible job on fare payment. And integrating their services. So, I would say right now for me, I would say New York City. And then second, San Antonio, because we're doing the most with the least.
Cheater.
So,
Susan, do you have a city that you like to learn from?
Yeah, and again, it's kind of a different scale than Austin is. But one of my favorite cities to visit and to really absorb and to take in their transportation network from a multimodal lens is Toronto. Yeah. It's they have a different set of parameters to deal with than we do here in the city of Austin, but they're taking great strides in many different components from every single mode. Is being addressed, and they're making strides in that. So I like to be able to go to places that are very diverse. I think Toronto is one of the most diverse locations in North America, and they've been doing a good job of really working with the communities that they're where their projects are located.
Okay, I have to cut you off. 20 seconds left. Julie, real quick.
I'm going to say our Spare Lab software, the founders are out of Toronto, so there you go. But I'm going to say Seattle, and we try to model Seattle. They do a lot of good things there, and then we keep close contact with DART over here and Houston Metro as well.
All right, we're out of time. Real quick, Hans Michael.
Okay, Houston. I'm going to say Houston. I was really impressed. Even when I was down there about 10 years ago, I remember I was in a meeting and they were talking about expanding the Katy Freeway. And there was a serious discussion about putting a bus-only lane in the embankment of the cantilevered Katy Freeway, and I just had to pinch myself. I was like, "This is amazing." That didn't happen.
Inner Katy BRT.
Inner Katy BRT. That's what it became.
Yeah. All right, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you. The theme is collaborate, work together. We're all in it together. So really appreciate your time today. We'll be in the foyer.